Amen. Amen. So we just got that much done. Amen. I'm hoping that this is getting clearer and clearer and clearer. Okay? Especially the stuff in Romans. Okay? That part, that whole stuff. People will get distracted in the earlier part about works and grace and this and that. Fine. Go listen to the teaching that deals with all that. Okay? Search for the doctrine of grace. We'll take all that, deal with it quite nicely, I believe. So let's be careful we don't get distracted by that. And some of you on the live stream who haven't heard that teaching yet, you're going to listen to everything I just said and say, oh, no, but what about earlier in the chapter? Don't worry about earlier in the chapter. Go listen to the other teaching first. Then if you still have a problem, then call me. Okay? Because that's a real tough thing to understand what Paul's talking about when he talks about works and he talks about favor or grace and what it means. All right? And how he's trying to put that together. All right. For this teaching, we're trying to understand the relationship between faith, works, and salvation. And we're still starting to get there. We got a lot more to do. We got a lot more to cover, and we're only in part 5. I can't believe I'm actually at a time in my career here where I actually say only in part 5. If we stopped here, it'd be a short one. Okay? Most of the ones lately have been going 10 plus, so we'll see. So let's see where this goes. I hope this was a blessing. This is now what we call the afterburn. And so if you have a comment or question about this teaching, specifically this part of the teaching, but if it's of the other parts, we can deal with those as well. You can raise your hand, or if you're on a live stream, you can type it in, and Robert will go ahead and ask that over the microphone. And so who wants to go first?
Thank you so much, Rabbi. This is... Having come into this through your first teaching on Are You Saved, this is just expanding and expanding my understanding. And all I could think of was when I was knee-deep in Christian Zionism, how Romans 11 got twisted around a bit. So this is very special. I just wanted to share a thought that came to me. You were talking about why the Jews have to wait for the fullness of the Gentiles, because if we have all these Jews coming in, they wouldn't accept the Gentiles.
Hold on.
Okay, go ahead.
They're not waiting. He's making them wait.
I understand.
Okay, just be careful with that.
Okay.
Okay, because otherwise it sounds like they may be just being stubborn or something. No. He's not drawing them in big numbers because of this.
Right.
Okay.
Got it. Okay, yes. So he's doing this so that they wouldn't reject or judge the Gentiles who are walking now as Israel, and they need to recognize us also as Israel. But on the other hand, the thought that I had was it's so vital what you're teaching us, how to differentiate between the Judaistic areas where they go into the rabbinics and they go beyond Torah and lay heavy burdens that we don't need to bear, and yet you balance that with a deep respect for Brother Yehuda, and that is a precious balance, because I just thought, wow, as we who are coming in from Gentiles and being ripped out of that old wild tree, as we learn to respect and walk humbly before our brother Yehuda, then perhaps it would be safe for Yahweh to bring them in, because they'll come in and receive the honor due to an elder brother.
I think that might be part of it. You know, look, here's part of the thing that we're dealing with here is that we have a kind of a strange shifting, okay? When you guys were all in Christianity, you were all trying to get the Jews to become Christians. Now that you're in Messianic, the big problem is all of you wanting to become Jews. And I've got people leaving and going into Judaism on a scary speed of rate. You know, there's a lot of people that are just running over the bridge into Judaism. It's happening. I hear about this probably on a monthly basis. Somebody that's connected loosely or strongly even with MTOI, that for whatever reason, or I talk to somebody in another group saying, hey, in our group, they're all sort of running into Judaism. It's just so funny, too, because when all these are the same people that when they were Christians are trying to convert Jews into Christianity. And now they've got excited about Torah observance, and now they want to go the other way. we've got to find that balance. Yes, Judah deserves an honored position and respected position, but they don't necessarily need to be what we need to become. Okay? Because remember, according to the way this is worded, they're not in the tree either. They need to be grafted back in a fullness. Okay, so why do we want to go be a part of that ungrafted part? Okay? So this is part of the challenge. Of course, we're not going to do the wheat tares thing and try to judge who's in, who's out, whatever. I'm just saying is the way this is worded, a good chunk of the natural branches are needing to be grafted back in. The natural branches, as we can identify today, are called Jews, because the rest of Israel doesn't really know who they are. So all we know of the visible remnant that exists of the natural branches are the Jews. And so they have some truth, certainly have an awful lot of study and history of understanding the word in ways that go far and beyond where we've necessarily gotten to as a group, as a whole. Okay, some of us may be further than others, but you have to be careful you don't fall into the trap of deciding you want to go that way instead of stay where you are. Now remember, Paul sitting there in Romans 11 saying, be careful that you don't get cut off as well. Okay? And that can happen. That can certainly happen. And so let's be careful with all that. Thank you for bringing that up, Shira.
All right, thank you, Rabbi, for the teaching. Looking at Scripture and seeing, I think Yahweh kind of paint a picture between. I see King David and King Solomon, and their failures towards the end of their life or in their life. I can't help but want to kind of judge if somebody's saved or not, and I respect and appreciate how you're guiding us to keep the balance and not even go there in our lives. And I like that a lot. What is the with Esau and Isaac, what is God trying to teach us in those comparisons? And now with the natural and the unnatural, and I know you're hitting on. That's where my mind and my heart goes. Is there's.
Well, look, and you gave several examples, and some of the examples are better to make a certain point and some for to make a different point. I mean, look, when you have Cain and Abel, you have Cain being told, look, if you do what's right, won't I also be pleased with what you do? Okay, which is, again, the same thing Romans 11 is kind of saying. Okay, if you choose to do the right things and do it the right way, won't I also be pleased with you? And then you see the arrogance and the ego and the pride and all of that stuff come into play, and the hurt feelings and the anger that Cain had, and it caused a problem. Jacob and Esau, you see that one really valued more than the other their birthright and their bloodline and what their inheritance was. So you see lots of examples of these things. You also see people who seem great then do some really dumb things. So that should also be the think you stand lest you fall type of thing. You see Solomon had a big problem with that. He figured it out eventually at the end, and he had it kind of figured out a little bit in the beginning, but in the middle there he had some real big problems, okay? Because after all, being the wisest man, he ended up being not that wise. And so, we have to be careful. By the way, Solomon almost works, I just thought of this, almost like Yeshua saying, when the Pharisees are sitting in Moses' seat and they're teaching Moses, do what they say. But they don't always do what they say, so don't do what they do. Well, guess what? Solomon did really great disseminating wisdom to other people. Didn't mean that he always did it in his own life. Be careful that you don't judge your teachers like myself with that sort of wrong way of seeing things. I may be very good at counseling you and giving you advice, and maybe not that all great in my own life. That doesn't mean you should discount me as a teacher, because I'm sure that every teacher has that problem to some degree. Okay? Only one perfect being's ever been on this planet. Everybody else has fallen short. Okay? And so we have to be careful about that. All right, which is why we're all trying to transform into the image of Yeshua, not the image of an apostle, not the image of a prophet, not the image of Moses, not the image of one of the teachers today. We're trying to become Yeshua-like, the only perfect one. And so we have to be careful with all that.
So I've got several things here. The first one's a comment. When you were talking about, or when Romans was talking about the root supports you, triggered in my mind that we get in trouble when we start thinking it's our congregation. And that was basically the same concept. The roots are ours, as opposed to we are the roots. Mm-hmm. Whereas instead of this is my congregation, I am part of this congregation, not owns me, but I'm from this congregation, as in the ownership is reversed.
Yeah, because remember, Israel is not the root. It's their tree, okay? The root is the tree of life. The root is Torah, life, light, the word. That's the root, okay? Go ahead.
Second question, you mentioned, was talking a lot about thinking you're special. Can you unpackage why that is that such a big trip up for so many people and, all throughout history? Why is that? Where is the motivation that we're thinking we're special?
No, the problem is not that we think we're special. The problem is that we're so completely insecure that we need to convince ourselves we're special. It's an overcompensation, okay? Our complete lack of confidence, all our overwhelming insecurities, all kind of get resolved if I feel I'm special. It fixes everything. It fills that terrible, immature place of just being so insecure and feeling worthless and of no value, even though we should be able to find all those things without needing to be over the top, uniquely special above other people. Okay? So it comes out of a vacuum, of a hole that's now trying to be filled by this overcompensation.
Thank you. I thought you had something special for that one. Then may not be all that important, but every time it talks about the tares, I'm thinking, as a gardener, they're literally growing side by side and the roots are tangling around each other. So you physically cannot separate them. Mm-hmm. But you seem to completely avoid that metaphor. Is there a reason, or does this add a different layer?
I didn't avoid it. I didn't even think of it, so there's no avoiding it. No, but that's a good point. I mean, because, remember, I was growing up in the big city with concrete. We didn't deal with, roots and tangled wheat and tares and stuff in the big city. We didn't have that. But if you think about it, I like the metaphor because you entangle yourselves with the tares. Or if you're a tare, you're entangling yourselves with the wheat because of your relationships. And so tearing out one or tearing up one, that will affect the other as well, because you are intermingling your roots and you are entangling yourselves. So it's a great metaphor. Thank you for bringing it up, Sarah Beth.
So I wanted to make a comment or just kind of share the epiphany I sort of had when you said this. So you mentioned that Yeshua's life was good enough to cover all lives. And as I toyed with that in my mind, I realized that, wow, the Word is that powerful because He's the Word, right? So, I don't know.
Look, the Word is enough to offset all lives by His death, but the Word is also strong enough to bring life to everyone. The Word is enough. So it's enough for everything.
And to transform.
And what?
And to transform us.
And to transform us. It's the most powerful thing there is. And it manifested into the most powerful being that ever walked on the planet when it put on flesh. The Word put on flesh. That's very powerful. That's important that when, sometimes we don't extrapolate out what something is telling us and then how much more it's telling us. So Christine said, well, if you're saying that, I need to kind of ponder on what it means that His life was in exchange for all life. Then if He's the Word, that Word is powerful enough for all life. And if He's the light, then that light's enough to shine light on all life. If He's the way, then He's the way of all life. Okay? And so all of these powerful metaphors can all start to come together. Okay? Daweed?
Going hand in hand with what my sister said about roots entangling each other's and things like that, there are some specific ways that we are to do our best, it seems to me at least, to identify who is a tare and who's not in this fact of like marriage or something like that.
Nope. You are not to identify wheat and tares. You
Well-
are to seek counsel as to whether or not you should be yoked with someone who potentially could be one or the other. You may be the one who's walking pretty good right now and ultimately be the tare, and they may be walking poorly and ultimately be the wheat. So be careful how we word this stuff.
Okay, the wording may be wrong, but basically, I guess what I'm trying to say is, so you touched on it, seek counsel, and that's it?
That's it. Don't trust your emotions and yourself to see through your emotions when it comes to liking or loving someone and then getting married. Seek outside counsel that is unfettered or unfiltered by the emotions. Okay? Which means be careful about counseling with a parent who may either like or not like the person you choose, because that emotion is going to filter. Either way, I've seen parents push somebody on somebody because they really liked them, and I've seen them be really against somebody because they didn't like them. And by the way, neither one of those parents necessarily knew whether or not that person really was the right person for their child. But their emotion was filtering. You need to find someone who has a dispassionate involvement, that doesn't have an emotional involvement in there except to help you make the right choice or the best possible choice under the conditions. Because we never can really know until the fruit bears it out, but at least to help make the best possible choice, doing the best possible vetting of the situation so that you're going in eyes open, having discussed everything that needs to be discussed, okay? But be careful thinking, but I need to know if someone's a tare before I marry them. You're not going to know. And by the way, it may be you anyway. You might look pretty good on the surface, but that doesn't mean that you don't end up being a problem later. It could totally reverse, okay? Christine, second shot.
So I want to carefully ask a question then, with that being said. In verse 27, Matthew 13, it says, "And the servants of the master came and said to him, 'Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? From where then does this darnel come from?'" How did they know that there was even a difference?
Because remember in the parable, he says and identifies that there's darnel. Not that they identified it, he tells them. He says, "But while the men sleep, his enemy came and sowed darnel among the wheat and went away. And when the blade sprouted and bore fruit, then the darnel also appeared." And the servants and said, okay, so at this point, they're seeing something. But remember, he's telling this story to make a point. Remember, it's a parable. And he's telling them, the people listening, all right? But then, of course, the problem then deals with Sarah Beth saying, well, if the roots are connected, but also, it's not always to see the one from the other and pull them apart. Yeah, something looks like a darnel doesn't always end up being. It could turn out that you get fooled. That's kind of where he's going. You're not qualified to figure this out. Well, she said, and sometimes can you just not know them by their fruits? Yes, but they can bear different fruit because they could choose to graft back in. They can make teshuvah. So that's part of the problem too. If I were to go in every one of your lives at very specific points in your lives, I would have torn you up and thrown you in the fire. And I'm not just saying me, meaning me. I mean, any one of you would have said, oh yeah, I was darnel at that point. Okay? And so we are not qualified to know whether or not a person will stay that way, because in the interesting case of real life, we're not wheat and tares. A tare doesn't turn into wheat. But we can. We can change. We can make teshuvah. We can transform and conform into a different image. We don't get stuck only being us. We can change into Him. Okay? And we're not qualified to make that identification. Okay? Good. You gonna try this again? Zarek's not there to distract you this time, so go ahead.
Okay, so connecting, the adversary doesn't give us, he only strengthens what's already there. So the enemy going through was strengthening what was already there, not just, planting enemies there. So if we're going to match this parable with other things you've taught, it's not this person is just predestined. It's the enemy went through and strengthened.
Okay, so let's be careful. Who's the enemy here? Who? Oh, some of you are wondering now, Rabbi's setting us up. And you're right. Anybody acting in an adversarial way to where the Father's trying to get you and encouraging you to go in that direction. Your family members, your boss, your best friend, whoever it is that's trying to encourage you that it's okay to do this when you shouldn't do whatever this is. They're acting in an adversarial way. That doesn't mean it's Hasatan. We don't have to go into that Christian thing of it. The devil did everything, okay? And certainly, I promise you, the devil doesn't make you do anything. So you can never say that term. The devil made me do it. He never makes you do anything. He encourages you to do what you want to do. If you didn't want to do it, you wouldn't do it. So he doesn't make you do anything. So, but that's such a great Christianese term, though. Oh, the devil made me do it. Really? You mean you really didn't want to do it? Oh, no, I didn't want to do it. Yes, you did. Come on. Liar, liar, pants on fire. Okay, you wanted to do it. Maybe not up here. Intellectually, you knew you shouldn't do it, and you didn't want to do it up here, but in your heart, you still wanted to do it. Guess what? Between head and heart always wins. That's why you got to change the heart. Heart of the Matter teaching, 64 parts. There's a reason why that's the biggest one we ever did, because that is the problem. You got to clean that up. You got to lay up the word. It says, lay up the word in your heart. Then out of the abundance of the heart, better actions will come out. The head's going to lose to the heart every time. How many of you remember, it's kind of like, especially when you were younger and you fell in lust or in love with somebody, like you got that, all goo-goo-eyed about. Were you thinking straight? No, because the heart overrides the brain. Okay? The heart overrides the brain. And so, when you tell me intellectually you didn't want to do it, I believe you. But that's not why you didn't, did it. You did it not because somebody else made you. You did it because you wanted to do it. In your heart. In your head, you didn't want to do it. The head doesn't get to win. Unless you have a strong enough will, you're going to set your face like flint or whatever. And then you're going to push through and make the heart behave and start changing it. That takes a lot of work and effort, at least initially. But you've got to make that choice. But don't say anybody else made you do something. You wanted to do it. All right. Anybody else? Okay, Marty?
So regarding that, I thought of a story about a guy I heard of being talked about who was, he was like number one in the government for working with their currency counterfeiting program. And he was the number one. So at some point, he was interviewed, and an interviewer said, how were you able to do this? How were you so good at what you did? Did you know all the little techniques and the tricks that the counterfeiters did? And he said, no, there's no way to keep up with all that. They're so good. They're very clever. He said, but what I did do was I familiarized and I knew the real so well that when the counterfeit did come along, I could recognize it right away because I knew the real so well. And so that little story for me just tells me if I just focus on my walk, focus on the truth of the word when it comes to me, and don't concern myself about all the tricks and the things that are out there that are going to try to pull me away, I'll recognize those when they come, and I just won't have anything to do with them. So it's the fact of trying to figure out who is a darnel and who is a wheat. You're going to go crazy trying to do that because there's really no way. But if you know the truth and you focus on the truth and that's all you live by, then all the other stuff you'll recognize it. It's the Deuteronomy 13 thing. If the person who's going to try to lead you away, even though he's doing miracles, he's seeing signs, he's having dreams, whatever, and it looks good, you're not going to follow that person because you know what the authentic is. So that's just a comment I had.
All right, I guess I need to say something so that we can make it more clear. Thank you for bringing that up because you're helping me to realize something. Okay. There is a difference between the wheat and tares parable, which is talking about ultimately the end result, and having discernment now on whether or not you need to be interacting with people that are not where they need to be yet. Did we catch that? Because you don't know where they're going to ultimately end up. Some people probably spend a little bit of time avoiding you. And hopefully you ultimately end up in the right place. But when they first saw you, even though you were starting to head in the right direction, you still look pretty worldly to them. Okay? And so realize that there's a difference between using discernment to say, whatever they're doing over here is not helping me go where I want to go. Now, they may ultimately clean themselves up and get to where they need to get to, but they're not there yet. And if I go over there, it's only going to pull me more in that direction than going in the direction I want to go. So I'm going to use discernment to stay away from that. But I'm going to have hope and prayer and optimism that they will get that done too at some point. Wheat and tares is talking about the ultimate end result, the in or the out, okay? So let's be careful with that, because Marty was talking about how while you're looking at this, but you also have that discernment. So I just wanted to kind of clarify the two sections of what you said, that you have the discernment to say, okay, but if I look at the fruit of where these people are right now, well, those are people maybe I don't need to be with right now. However, that may change, or you may change. Let's not all rest on our laurels and think that, hey, I've got it all worked out. This is a daily thing. It's like, look, we're all addicts. We're addicted to our own desires. And so what's something you learn as an addict? If you've ever been an addict and you've ever talked to people and you have family members that are addicts, and we're all addicts, but we just don't have it diagnosed as that way, what's the one thing that they'll always tell you? Once an addict, always. In other words, you can never taste of or partake of or put yourself in that temptation because the addiction will always be there to raise back up. Well, guess what? So are you. So you need to avoid places that will tempt you in wherever your addiction is. And we're not talking things limited to like drugs or alcohol or whatever, okay? You may be addicted to pleasing people. I mean, that sounds weird, but you may actually be addicted to that. And so you got to be careful that you don't put yourself in a place where you have to be always pleasing everybody, and then you lose yourself in where you're trying to go because you're much more worried about what everybody else thinks. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that this can become a problem. And so if you know you have an issue and you see people over here that are doing something that could tempt you into that issue, stay away from it. Don't judge it. They may clean it up, hopefully. But for right now, where you are, you don't need to be in that mix of that. But careful that you're using judgment, not judging them. Judging them would be deciding their tares. No, judgment says whatever they're doing for me right now, where they are right there, hopefully all of us are growing and transforming, but where they are right there and where I am right now, that's probably something I shouldn't be involved in. And hopefully all of you and them, keep going to the point where you do get transformed. Does it making sense? Yeah. But we got to stay away from the wheat tares thing, trying to figure out who's in and who's out. Think of it that way. Wheat and tares is about who's in and out, not where people are in their journey. When you're looking at people about whether I should interact with them, you really should be thinking, are they where they are in their journey to help me go forward in my journey, or are they going to drag me back because of where they are in their journey, not because of who they are? Okay? But where they are in their journey. Hopefully they're on the journey just like you are. And I know a lot of you have talked to me and told me there's things that you did and in your life that you lived that you'll never tell anybody. That means that you were probably the type of person all of us today would want to probably avoid at the moment, because you wouldn't be helpful in our journey. But we shouldn't judge you because, look, you came out of it. You're not still there. Guess what? The people that you're avoiding now, hopefully that'll be the same thing. They won't still stay there even though they're there now. Because all of us could say, you don't want to, you would never wanted to hang out today with the person I was 20 years ago, or 30 or 40, whatever years ago it was. Some of you it was like 5 years ago. You're new on the journey. Yeah, you wouldn't have wanted to be with me then. A lot of you would say that. But you're not there anymore. Let's have that same optimism for the people that we're not going to spend a lot of time with right now, but we'll allow them to do their journey on their own, lest they drag us down into that journey. Okay? Make sense? Now, I'm not saying avoid people that are having issues. I'm saying avoid the ones who have issues that are also issues you've had in the past that could pull you in. If people are having issues that are not a temptation to you at all, you may be helpful to them. So I'm not saying let's avoid all people that are struggling. Because some of you are going to say that same thing. Oh, well, so we're not supposed to help anybody? Not the ones that are going to drag you back into the same problem that you were doing. Okay? So if you had an alcohol problem, make it simple. Okay? You don't want to go and hang out with the guys who are going to drink 5 or 6 beers and a bottle of wine and everything else while they're sitting talking to you. Now, if you've never had an alcohol problem, you may be useful in helping them to kind of pull out of that because it's not going to drag you down. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay? So a lot of it has to do with what your issues are and if they match or don't match with the people you're trying to help. But don't convince me that you're trying to help people that you're codependent with or that could drag you back into that bad lifestyle that you used to actually be in. I won't be buying that.
All right. Cheryl asked, because it is the Father's desire that all be saved, does that mean he calls all, but all do not answer?
Listen to the Millennium and Kingdom teaching.
And
Sorry to answer that way. By the way, and I tell the people I'm discipling and training to usually answer questions by pointing towards the teaching. I do the same thing. Easier for you to listen to 3 hours of something than for me to try to say it again for 3 hours. So, and then if you still have a question, come to me. But it's let's put it this way. It's my belief that his desire that all men be saved and that there is a process that he has in place where that would be possible, but that people will choose not to. That's my short answer. How that all works is explained in more detail in the other teaching.
Okay, from Adrian and Patricia Bogle. To clarify, the symbolism of the 2 olive trees ultimately relates back to the tree of life and the tree of good and evil.
That's the metaphor I used today. I would agree. I would say yes. Okay?
From Kelly Jean. Abba redeems by the blood of the Lamb, Yeshua. Many are brought out of bondage by his blood, to be brought out to be tested and to obey, which includes the Christians who claim Yeshua as Messiah?
No. Okay, let me clarify that. Okay, hold on. First of all, let me just go back to the 2 tree things. Think of it that way. The good tree is fed by what? Torah, tree of life. The bad tree is fed by what? It's figuring out in your own eyes what's right and wrong. That's knowledge of good and evil, right? So that's the 2 trees. The problem that I have with what you just said, whoever's one that you were just reading, is this, okay? Be careful about how you apply the blood, okay? And this is really the problem, okay? His dying and being resurrected provided redemption for everyone all at once. Okay, you don't have to claim the blood. You don't have to, quote unquote, choose to come under the blood. What he did happened and affected all of us at the same time, whether you accept it or not. Okay? So let's be clear about that. What's missing is whether or not he's opened your eyes to that. Whether he's opened your ears and your heart to understand the full ramification of what that did. So that's an eyes-opening, ears-opening, heart-opening problem, not a, coming under the blood problem. Because I don't even know what coming under the blood means. This is kind of like, that's all Christianese talk. He shed his blood, meaning he died. The blood doesn't become magic. What matters is that he was resurrected. He's alive. And in dying and being brought back to life, he paid a price that we hopefully now don't have to pay. But that's going to be based on our choices. He made it available so that you wouldn't have to pay, but now what you do matters. By the way, before he did that, what you did didn't matter at all. You were going to die. You deserved death, and that was the end of it. Because he died and shed his blood, now there's an opportunity for you not to die. The opportunity has been provided. But be careful with the Christianese thinking about coming under the blood and then whatever else was said in that sentence. It's not about that. What he's going to do to you at some point is make you aware by opening your eyes and your ears and your heart to that there's more than what you were shown going on in this book. And then he'll reveal himself in fullness and truth. He'll reveal the Son in fullness and truth. And then you get to choose what to do with that revelation. Okay? All right. Next question.
All right.
And I like the way you nodded your head, Robert, because you knew I was going to say something like that. Okay. So
A comment by David Botwick Rice. Romans 9:27, quoting Isaiah 10:22, is the same theme as Romans 11:26, quoting Isaiah. Those returning and doing teshuvah will be saved. It is our choice to return.
Yep. Okay, and I didn't go back to that quote because it's the same thing, but exactly. If you go and see what Isaiah said and compare it to what Paul was saying in Romans, or the translators, the way they translated it, is that it's about those that would make choices to repent and get back into the tree or get back on the path to teshuvah. Those are the ones who would be saved. Okay? Because remember, saved is not a status. Did Israel not get pulled out of Egypt? Absolutely. Did they all end up in the land? Absolutely not. Could they have all ended up in the land? Absolutely. You see, it's the same metaphor. They all were delivered out of that bondage, out of Egypt, brought out, redeemed, and they all could have gone right into the land. So what was the difference? Belief and action. The salvation was already made possible to all of it. It was provided. It was no doubt, there was no reason for them to not end up in the land. He said, I'll protect you. I'll fight the battles for you. I'll come against your enemies. I'll fight for you. He says, remember, it's Yahweh who fights for you. Did they believe him? No. If they believed him, they would have gone in the land. No, they were afraid of the giants and I don't know. I would have been afraid about the giant thing of grapes. I need like a knife and a fork to eat a grape. And a bunch of grapes they had to carry on a pole. That would have scared me. Anyway, so that's more the issue. Robert, go ahead. Oh, you're done? All right, let's go ahead and get the children. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Shabbat Shalom. Be blessed and have a good week. Laila Tov, have a good night. And we'll see you on Tuesday, hopefully, at the Torah study. Shabbat Shalom.